Welcome to Legal Studies, and today we're going to be learning about the division of constitutional lawmaking power. So where are we in the study design? Well, we've just started Unit 4, Area Study 1. We're here on our second dot point, and you'll see that we're going to be learning about constitutional lawmaking power, and that's going to require you to know three things. What is an exclusive power? What is a concurrent power? And what is a residual power? So essentially what we're thinking about in this topic is, one, first of all, what is the Constitution? What does it do? And second of all, what are the three different powers it gives to our government? So our first question, what is the Constitution? Well, it's basically just a legal document that sets out how our government, how our parliament, how our court system is going to run. Essentially, what that means is it's the document that sets out the rules of the game. That game being how we run our country. So it tells us what Parliament is allowed to do. It tells us what courts are allowed to do and that sort of thing. So our big central question for today's topic is, who is allowed to do what in our system of government? And you might know that we've got different levels of government in Australia. First, we've got our federal government. All right, that's operating at the national level, and they make decisions about certain types of things. They make laws about some types of things. Then every state has got its own government that makes decisions about what's happening inside its state. And then we're not going to spend too much attention on it in this course, but we've also got all sorts of little local governments, local councils at the more local level. We're just going to be looking at federal and state governments in this course. And so the Constitution basically divides up the types of power that it gives to government into these three different categories. First of all, I'll start with the exclusive powers. It's called exclusive powers because these are the powers that we give exclusively or just to the Commonwealth government. So the federal government gets these powers. And I'll give you some examples of those in a moment. On the other hand, we've also got some powers that the Constitution says are concurrent powers. And now the word concurrent means shared. So in other words, these are the powers that we share between the Commonwealth government and the state governments. All right, so both the Commonwealth government and the state government get to use these powers. And then finally, we've got the residual powers. And they're called residual because residual as a word means leftovers. And they're leftovers or they're residual powers because they were completely left out of the Constitution. We didn't write them down anywhere. And we decided that anything we didn't put in that document, anything left over, anything residual, we would let the states do all of that stuff. So anything we put down in the Constitution is either going to be exclusive, given just to the Commonwealth, or we will have written it down so that we could share it between the Commonwealth and the states. And anything that we left out of the document, anything left over, we let the states do. So let's have a look at a couple of examples that might clarify this a bit. So for example, exclusive powers held only by the Commonwealth Parliament, so only the Commonwealth Parliament, the federal parliament, the national level of government, they are the only ones allowed to use these powers, and they involve things like, for example, national defence. Right? And it would make sense that our national government is the only one who's allowed to make laws about national defence and the army and things like that. They're also the only government allowed to make laws about the making of currency, so our money, right? Because we have an Australian dollar, and it's the same dollar in Victoria as it is in Western Australia, all right? Because the national government, the Commonwealth government, is the only one allowed to make laws about making money. On the other hand, the Constitution also writes down some powers that are concurrent, shared between the Commonwealth and the states. For example, taxation is the big one here. Your income tax, if you work a part-time job at the moment and if you have to pay any tax on that, that is collected by the federal government. So our national level government collects the income tax. But if you sell a house in Victoria, you have to pay tax called stamp duty, anytime you sell a house, and that tax is collected by the state government. All right, so both levels of government have the ability to make laws about tax. Same thing with marriage and divorce. They can make their own rules if they'd like. And then finally, we've got the residual powers. These are all the powers that were left over, all the powers that we didn't write down, everything that we left out of the Constitution, and we leave them with the states. Only the states have those powers, and there are really almost an infinite amount of residual powers because it's anything that we didn't write down. But here are some examples. Education, not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. That's why each state has its own system of education. Hospitals, also left out of the Constitution, so each state is in charge of its hospitals and things like that. Same with police and criminal law. In fact, every single state has its own separate set of crimes. And now they're often pretty similar, but there are some differences. Some things are crimes in Victoria, but not in Western Australia, because we actually have different criminal law in each state. And our police are, funded by the state governments. We've got the Victoria Police, we've got, police in New South Wales. So there's a couple of examples for us. And that's really, this slide encompasses everything we need to know for this topic. First of all, you need to know what these three powers are. You need to know who holds these powers, and you need to know an example of what some of these powers are. And that's it for the division of lawmaking powers. See you next time.